Hi, hello, my name is Gomer Joseph. I hope you all have been having a great day so far. Hopefully I can make this introduction as short as possible. Let me start by saying how I usually upload news commentary videos, but I decided to actually start this new series where I'd be covering true crime cases every Tuesday. Ever since I was young, true crime cases have always interested me. Watching America's Most Wanted at a young age is what really introduced me to true crime cases, and I've been interested ever since. As I told people that I was covering this case, I was really surprised about how many people didn't even know who she even was. Her story is something that should never be forgotten. Because of this case, it kind of triggered me as a kid. I wanted to make sure my windows were locked, and I was always careful about walking into my room. This case is the reason why I did my best to stay away from strangers out of fear of being kidnapped. As you can tell from the title, I'll be discussing the case of Elizabeth Smart. Before I start discussing this case, since it's a missing child's case, I want to inform y'all about 14-year-old Anaya Washington. She was last seen on January 29th, 2019. She's from Houston, Texas. She's a black female with black hair and brown eyes. Weighs 125 pounds and she's 5 feet. Please share, and if you have any information, please call 911 or 1-800-843-5678. Alright, here we go. Elizabeth Smart was born in Salt Lake, Utah in 1987 to parents Ed and Lois Smart. Her father Ed worked in real estate, but the Smart family was also a Mormon family. Elizabeth was the second of 6 children, 4 brothers and a sister. From what I found out about her early life, she seemed like what people would consider this all-American girl. She was known to be obedient, kind, smart, and even shy. Elizabeth loved to go horseback riding, did cross country, and played the harp. Because of her talents with this instrument, she would play at weddings and funerals. This girl had a great family life, loved her friends. Overall, she had a normal life and enjoyed a happy childhood. Unfortunately, her life would forever change on June 5th, 2002. Now, to the Smart family, it was a normal day. Before Elizabeth and her younger 9-year-old sister, Mary Catherine, went to bed, Elizabeth read the book Ella Enchanted to her little sister. As they slept in the middle of the night, Elizabeth was awakened by this cold metal against her cheek. The man told this 14-year-old girl, "I have a knife to your neck. Don't make a sound. Get out of bed and come with me, or else I will kill you and your family." As this man took Elizabeth out of her room, you can just guess how scared she was. As for a grown man to say those words to a child, obviously she was completely shaken and frightened. Mary Catherine witnessed the same thing since she and Elizabeth shared a bed. Mary Catherine would later explain how she didn't know what to do, which is completely understandable. She was 9 years old, she was a child. This scared child just witnessed her older sister get taken by a madman. What Mary Catherine did do was pretend to be asleep because she didn't want to take the chance of being taken. Yeah, she didn't want the chance of being kidnapped herself, and her family would never know what happened to the girls. When the coast was clear, Mary Catherine rushed to her parents' room, waking them up by telling them how someone took Elizabeth. At first, the parents were just waking up, believing that their daughter just had this nightmare. No matter what Ed and Lois were thinking, Mary Catherine insisted to her parents that someone took her sister. When they looked in the room, Elizabeth wasn't even there. After searching the room, they continued to look all over the house. Mary Catherine basically told her parents that no matter where they looked, they wouldn't find Elizabeth in the house. As they saw the cut window screen and couldn't find Elizabeth, that's when the situation became real to the parents. And they began to panic since their daughter was missing, which caused them to immediately call the cops. While the Smart family was wondering what happened to Elizabeth, she was being dragged to the forest. As this man was dragging her, she recognized him. Who she recognized him was as this man named Emmanuel, who was the so-called homeless street preacher. Before this event, her mother Lois offered him $5, and Ed even offered this guy a handyman job to work on the roof. She couldn't understand why this man, who her parents had helped out in the past, would want to take her away from her home. They did see a police car as, she was being dragged, and Elizabeth thought that she'd be rescued. Instead, Emmanuel pushed her to the ground and they hid from the car. Now, the thing about this man is that his name isn't really Emmanuel. His actual name is Brian David Mitchell. So you might hear me say Brian, Emmanuel, David, because they're all the same, since he couldn't make up his mind and he wanted to give himself all these different names. Now, while Elizabeth was being kidnapped, she would remember the stories about different children who were missing and how certain kids showed up dead. This 14-year-old girl asked him to kill her and leave her where they were at so that her family could find her instead of wondering what happened to her. What Mitchell told her was that he wasn't going to kill her yet, and that's just completely chilling to me. As to say something so chilling and wicked to a child completely freaks me out. Like, she constantly pleaded with him to let her go, but he just wouldn't listen to her. They eventually reached this camp in the forest after she's been dragged for hours. Once they arrived, Elizabeth saw this woman named Wanda Barzy, who was Brian Mitchell's wife, and she also went by Hepzibah. The moment Elizabeth saw this woman, she explained how Wanda had this dark energy to her and how she wasn't to be trusted either. As soon as Wanda saw Elizabeth, she hugged her, but it was this tight hug as if she warned this 14-year-old girl not to do anything to escape. What I'm gonna say has obviously disturbed me and will disturb y'all too. While Elizabeth was trying to process everything she just went through, Brian David Mitchell performed this wedding ceremony and declared this 14-year-old girl as his new wife. Because she knew what happened after a wedding, Elizabeth was telling him, like, no, I didn't even say I do. As she was trying to argue with this man, Mitchell warned her not to scream or fight back, or else he'd kill her, then placed duct tape over her mouth. Eventually, he raped Elizabeth. She did try to fight back, but unfortunately, he was just too strong for her. Back at the Smart family home, Elizabeth's parents were clueless as to who would take their daughter, and worried for her life. They worried for her safety. Mary Catherine did tell police that she recognized the man's voice as well, but she couldn't remember where she heard it from. Police were able to come to a conclusion that Elizabeth was specifically targeted and even considered it was related to sex trafficking. Like any family who wants to know where their child is, Elizabeth's family went on the media and pleaded for her safe return. Eventually, hundreds of people volunteered to help search for Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth wasn't really too far from home. She was able to hear the search party, but she was unable to scream for help since her mouth was duct taped and she was tied up. With all the stress that her parents were going through, her father Ed was eventually hospitalized due to the stress he was going through, as he constantly wondered where his little girl was. Despite the stress this family endured, the community was able to keep them strong. They were able to keep them going, and the Smart family truly appreciated that. Yet, the police still questioned the family despite the stress they were going through. I do understand that police usually look into those closer to the victim as a suspect. Like, hearing this, I just felt so bad for them because they've already been going through so much. Like, they were already stressing over, wondering where Elizabeth is, and you've got cops looking into them instead of finding out who was actually responsible for kidnapping this girl. Eventually, the police found out about this guy named Richard Reese, who was someone that worked for the family at one point, but became a suspect due to his own criminal history. While watching TV, Mary Catherine was confused. She just asked, why is Richard on TV? It wasn't him. Because the room was dark during the kidnapping, the adults in Mary Catherine's life didn't 100% trust her judgment. As Elizabeth was being held captive, she described how she wasn't sure when she'd get her next meal. She'd be bored and would be raped on a daily basis, sometimes more than once. Wanda Barzy would actually encourage these rapes and sit right next to Elizabeth as they occurred. This 14-year-old girl was also drugged, forced to consume alcohol, and when she passed out, Brian and Wanda would just laugh at her. Doing stuff like this to another human, and in this case, a child, these are actions of a monster. It's demonic, really, and in a sinful world like this, We shouldn't be surprised, but it's still hard to take in what these monsters did to this child. Throughout all the time that had passed, the Smart family never gave up hope. They still believed that Elizabeth was still alive somewhere. One time when Elizabeth talked about her life before, she happened to mention her cousin Olivia, who was the same age as her. After hearing this, Mitchell claimed that Olivia was chosen to be his next wife. Once Elizabeth found out about Brian's plan to kidnap her cousin, she felt this tremendous guilt, almost as if she betrayed her own family. I'm telling you, by the grace of God, the kidnapping failed. As Mitchell went to Olivia's house, he made a noise outside which woke up the whole family. Olivia pointed out to her parents how she heard the noise outside of her window. Stephen Wright, Olivia's father and Elizabeth's uncle, knew it couldn't just be this coincidence. His own niece was kidnapped and his own child was almost taken from him. Police, on the other hand, thought it was a prank, but Stephen wholeheartedly disagreed. Eventually, Richard Reese, who was the police's only suspect, was hospitalized. Unfortunately, he died of brain complications. After his death, his wife Angela Reese wasn't even allowed to see him because he was a suspect. This must have haunted her and pained her for so many years because as I researched this case, I found out that she died on December 18, 2015 due to a drug overdose. I truly believe that she never got over her husband's death, and it eventually led to her own death, which is tragic. After Richard's death, the police felt hopeless. They would follow psychic and devil worshiper leads, which I don't believe they should have gotten involved in the first place at all. There were also sexual, predator, extortioner, and biker gang leads, and they were discouraged because there was no info on Elizabeth's whereabouts after going to these different sorts of leads. Because of the incident involving her cousin, Elizabeth vowed to stay silent, which eventually caused Mitchell to untie her. Because of this freedom she gained, Mitchell felt comfortable to bring Wanda and Elizabeth in public. But the only catch was that Elizabeth should keep her face covered, but her eyes were shown. He also wanted Wanda and Elizabeth to never speak to anyone when they were out in public. For some reason, Mitchell walked them to this party, but no one recognized Elizabeth with her face covered. The three of them eventually traveled to California. As they went to this public library, someone believed that they recognized Elizabeth. Because of this, they immediately called the police. When the police arrived, they spotted Brian, Wanda, and Elizabeth. Once the cops approached them, Elizabeth was still silent, while Mitchell told the cops that Elizabeth was her daughter and claimed she couldn't show her face for religious beliefs. As the police questioned him, Wanda grabbed Elizabeth's knee, not to, as a warning, not to say a single word. The police asked her if she was Elizabeth, but she was unable to talk. Since the police didn't expect Elizabeth to act the way she did, they just left. Years later, Elizabeth explains how scared she was at that moment. She was so afraid to talk. People would ask her, why didn't she scream? Why didn't she run? Why didn't she call for help? Elizabeth explained to those people that they would never understand since they've never endured all that she did, and she's got a point. It's so easy for us as humans to say, well, I wouldn't have done that, I would have done this or that. But when you're actually in the situation, things might be different. Overall, after the cops left, she felt like it was just as bad as everything else she endured, from the kidnapping to the torture that she was living through. As Mary Catherine kept wondering who would have taken Elizabeth, it finally hit her. She recognized the man's voice as Manuel. After telling this to her family, they eventually informed the police. To the family's surprise, the police advised them not to go public with this information because they didn't want to cause this public speculation, and they were still so set on Reese being the suspect, even after his death. I understand the Smart family's frustration with the cops. They were discrediting the only witness. Yes, Mary Catherine was 9 at the time, but she was the only one who knew what happened to Elizabeth the night that she was taken away. Because of the family's impatience, which is understandable, like every second counts in any missing person's case, they agreed to go public with Emmanuel being the suspect. Not only was a sketch drawn of Emmanuel, but when word went out about this so-called homeless street preacher, Brian's sister recognized this description as her brother. This led to her making an anonymous call to the police. When all this information began to come, the Smart family got in contact with those who witnessed Elizabeth in public with Brian and Wanda. Even America's Most Wanted went over Elizabeth Smart's kidnapping and showed the public that Brian Mitchell was the suspect. What people didn't know was that Mitchell was in California. He was in police custody for like 3 days for breaking into a Presbyterian church. When he was arrested, Elizabeth and Wanda weren't able to drink any water or anything like that or eat anything because Mitchell was the one who always provided the food. This 14-year-old girl thought that with everything she survived so far, that she would die of starvation. Eventually, Mitchell was released and brought food with him. The Smart family was able to get in contact with Brian and Wanda's children who suffered abuse from them. There's even the story that they ate what they believed was chicken for dinner one night. When one of the daughters looked for her pet bunny, Wanda admitted how they ate the pet for dinner the other night. Unfortunately, their own children lost the chance at a normal childhood because of these two psychopaths. With enough pictures and information, Elizabeth Smart's family was able to connect Emmanuel as Brian David Mitchell. Because Elizabeth longed to get back home so badly, she told Mitchell how she had this feeling that they needed to go back to Utah. The way that she persuaded him to go back was by calling him this great prophet who was so close to God and how he should pray about it. Long behold, Mitchell claimed that God told him to go back to Utah. As the three of them arrived back to Utah, Elizabeth had hoped someone would recognize her. On March 12, 2003, they were at Walmart. Elizabeth had to wear sunglasses and a wig. As they were at the store, she noticed this wall full of missing children, but she couldn't see her face. Because of this, Elizabeth wondered if people forgot about her. People clearly didn't forget because a viewer of America's Most Wanted recognized Elizabeth and Mitchell. The police were immediately called, and once they arrived, they surrounded Elizabeth, Brian, and Wanda. As the police asked her if she was Elizabeth Smart, she was still unable to say that she was out of fear. This girl was adamant that she wasn't Elizabeth Smart until she was forced to when a cop showed a picture of herself. Once she was rescued, Brian and Wanda were arrested. Because she was finally free, Elizabeth was reunited with her family. I can only imagine the relief that both of them felt because they've longed for this reunion for 9 months. After all she's been through at the age of 14, it's a miracle that she didn't go crazy herself. Like, she went through some unimaginable torture. And the older I get, like 9 months, it doesn't seem too long. But when someone goes through what Elizabeth Smart went through, those 9 months would feel like an eternity. When Elizabeth got home, she even slept in her own bed, the same place that she was taken away from. Understandably, her parents constantly checked in on her. After being gone for 9 months, they must have needed to remind themselves how it was a reality for her to go back home. I'm sure they were overprotective as well after what they all were forced to endure. Since then, she's made TV appearances talking with people like Katie Couric and Oprah and countless others, became an activist for kidnapping survivors and child abuse victims, released a memoir titled My Story, and had 2 biopics about, her kidnapping. As for Brian Mitchell and Wanda Barzee, Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison while Barzee only had to spend 15 years. Wanda is currently out of prison, and that completely blows my mind. It completely baffles me. This psychotic lady had as much to do with Elizabeth Smart's kidnapping and the torture she endured as Mitchell did. I just felt like this was some slap to the face to Elizabeth and her family. Wanda and Brian took away 9 months of this family's life that can never be given back again. This woman is on parole, and they have assured Elizabeth how they'd keep a close eye on Wanda. As for me, she should have spent the rest of her life in prison like Mitchell did, and Elizabeth believes this as well. She's explained how she's more concerned about the public safety than her own. Like, Wanda lives right next to an elementary school. Like, I'm speechless about that. I'm gonna keep on going. Even though this monster is free, at least Mitchell will never see the light of day. Wanda's freedom doesn't take away the life that Elizabeth made for herself. Now, she's married to this Scottish man named Matthew Gilmore, so Elizabeth Smart is basically Elizabeth Gilmore now. They've got 3 children and are living a wonderful life now. By the grace of God, this story does have a happy ending. I truly believe God looked after this girl throughout those unimaginable 9 months. It's unfortunate how many other missing children's cases don't end like this, but this is an example of how we should never lose hope on those who have been missing for a long time, because at the end of the day, there's still hope. Thank you all for taking the time in your day to watch this video, and if you guys have any thoughts on this entire case, please leave your thoughts in the comment section. If you guys have any true crime cases you'd like me to cover, please message me, and I'll see y'all next week for True Crime Tuesdays. Talk to y'all later.